This is the Coach's Corner podcast, hosted live on CodyWork18.com. We're back for another edition of the Coach's Corner podcast here on a Wednesday evening. This is Cody Work speaking. Very glad to have you guys all here tonight. A lot of things we're going to go through today. We're going to cover a lot of the latest breaking news around the NFL, the latest headlines of this week, things that we found to be very interesting, very concerning at the same time. Some key headlines. Obviously we're going to look at the Vernon Davis trade to the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos attempt to get Joe Thomas from the Browns. Got coaches fired, quarterbacks benched this week. It's going to be a crazy week in the NFL, and we're all going to talk about it here on the Coach's Corner podcast today. So let's start things out early off. Simple off. I want to start out with a fact of the day. We're going to start the show off with a pretty interesting fact. Each time we do a show, there will be a fact of the day. Today's fact says that the average person spends about 12 weeks a year looking for things. And when you think about that, 12 weeks a year, you have 12 months, so you're technically spending a week of your time a month trying to find things. With me, I'd probably say the one thing that I'm always looking for is either my car keys or my wallet or a pen. When I need a pen the most, I can't find it, especially when I'm trying to take notes for the show, get everything written down, get my thoughts all organized in a proper place. I can't find a pen, and it's very frustrating. In the morning when you wake up and you got to go to work, it's very frustrating as well to sit there and to not know where your keys are, and you're in a hurry to get to work. You're already late. Always press snooze a few more times on the alarm clock on my cell phone, and I struggle with such a big inconvenience for me, and I definitely laugh at it every morning. And that's the first ever Fact of the Day segment here on the Coach's Corner podcast. Now we're going to jump into some NFL news around the league. As many of you know, it was announced that the San Francisco 49ers were going to trade Vernon Davis, who's the previous tight end for them, to the Denver Broncos in exchange for some draft picks. For Denver, this is a great opportunity for Denver to get deeper and more deadlier at the offensive position. As we've noted before here on the show, Owen Daniels came in the offseason, won the starting job, and through the first half of the season struggled. He played really, really well, in my opinion, against the Green Bay Packers. I think there was a lot riding on that game. As Gary Kubiak mentioned to him previously to the media, to us analysts over a conference call, was that Owen Daniels started off a little slow last year for the Baltimore Ravens, and then after the bye week, or a little bit after a few weeks, he was able to pick it back up, and he picked it back up big time. He had a lot of drops the first half of the season, which was a main cause of frustration for a lot of Denver Broncos fans, and then a lot of the outcry was wanting to see more of Virgil Green. So the Denver Broncos went with more two tight end sets against the Green Bay Packers, and what I believe was the best possible combination that you could do in that aspect to try to change things up. Obviously, the Denver Broncos looked so much more efficient on offense. They were able to run Peyton Manning's offense, let Peyton be Peyton. A lot of times they spent a lot of time, maybe 20, 30 minutes after practice on the practice field together as a whole unit working on things. And so when you're a coach or a spectator or a guy in the media and you see that, you know that they're taking the criticism. Peyton Manning's hearing that he can't throw the ball or that he's not the same or he's falling off, and Peyton Manning's legacy starting to fall. He heard that and he takes it quite seriously. In all honesty, it's very sad to see that the NFL is still doubting Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning's put up tremendous numbers. He's done a lot of amazingly great things for the Denver Broncos. And as we saw in the Green Bay game, his arm strength looked fine. His accuracy looked fine. He looked a lot more comfortable. On third down, he was able to check audibles against the Green Bay Packers defense, picking up the blitz on the edge with Clay Matthews or other guys, and he took advantage of the Green Bay secondary, having two guys injured and Sam Shields. And it's a very good thing, very good sign to see the Denver Broncos back on top, getting things back in order. The running game's going. Ronnie Hillman ran for yards. C.J. Anderson ran for yards. It was a very, very impressive feature for me, in all honesty, to see that happen, to see the Denver Broncos come together on offense and play to the level that their defense is playing, which is at an unbelievable rate right now. We're going to talk about that as well. The Denver Broncos defense, the best defense in the NFL right now, best secondary, held Aaron Rodgers, arguably the best quarterback in the National Football League at this present moment, to 77 yards passing, got pressure on him all time. And so now the blueprint has been established for how to beat Aaron Rodgers. What are you going to do to beat Aaron Rodgers? How how do you counteract this? And a lot of it is you have to get pressure on him. And we saw many times, even against this great Denver defense, he was able to extend plays a little bit. There was one play where Denver Bronco DBs literally had to cover for about 13, 14 seconds because the pressure was getting to him, but he was able to extend the play out, kind of move around in the pocket a little bit, even though it was collapsing around him. And he threw an incomplete pass, but the Denver Broncos DBs had to cover for 14 seconds, which you can't expect in the National Football League. Not at this level, not at the professional level, not even at the collegiate level, maybe at the high school level, but not in the pros. So Denver Broncos win 29-10, very impressive win, and now they're on the road this week to take on the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis. The last time the Denver Broncos played at Indy was Peyton Manning's homecoming after signing with the Broncos, and the Broncos fell short of a touchdown in that game. It was a tough game, but this is a different Denver Broncos team, and this is a different Colts team. The Colts are, obviously struggling. Andrew Luck's still struggling with a shoulder injury, rib injury, and their defense is, gives up a lot of points, doesn't seem to be able to cover guys. And I think the Denver Broncos just have the perfect formula for this. There's a lot riding on this game, as was last Sunday with Pat Bowlen's being honored, into the Ring of Fame for the Denver Broncos. This game for Peyton Manning, he wins this. He has the all-time win record as a quarterback, and he also has a chance to surpass the career all-time passing yard record previously set by Brett Favre. So he could break 2 Brett Favre records this week, and he could possibly cement himself as the greatest quarterback of all time, which I do believe he will be. Easy first ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Very excited to see how Peyton Manning is going to do, and I'm really, really, really excited to see how Vernon Davis could come in here and help the Denver Broncos become even deadlier on offense. Vernon Davis is a vertical threat. When he catches the ball up the seam, he's got speed like no other that, we hardly see in tight ends, maybe outside of Rob Gronkowski and Jimmy Graham and Greg Olsen. I say he's in that same exact category. He's a very efficient playmaker, and he's going to help the Denver Broncos tremendously. So I'm very excited to see Vernon Davis here for the Denver Broncos. He'll wear number 80. He will play against the Colts this week. And so it's going to be a very interesting game, and I'm looking forward to seeing that game and all the other games this upcoming weekend. And there's some big games going on in the NFL. Obviously we're going to talk about the battle of the undefeated teams. There's a situation that I do want to look at that's going on in the NFL, and it has to do with the San Francisco 49ers, who are absolutely struggling right now in probably every major category that there is to struggle in, from front office management to coaching to play on the field. We can look back at the last weekend when they were playing the Rams, and it was unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable that Colin Kaepernick had Torrey Smith wide open on the left side of the field with no cornerback covering him. The safety was in the box as well, and Torrey Smith was signaling that he was wide open and to just audible and just throw him the ball, because if he would have thrown him the ball, it would have been a 99-yard touchdown, and Colin Kaepernick looks like a freaking genius. But Colin Kaepernick hasn't made those kind of plays. He's made all the wrong types of plays this year. He hasn't had too much support, in my honest opinion. I don't think the coaching staff has been great around there. The offseason, I think the expectation for them is they thought after Harbaugh left was that they were going to get a coach who was well-seasoned, had a lot of experience, had a great resume. Instead, they got their offensive line coach, a guy who we've hardly ever heard of, a guy who, in my opinion, doesn't appear to get the whole head coach aspect that all these other NFL head coaches have. You have the stable names like John Fox, Jack Del Rio, guys who have been around, and then you get a guy like Jim Tomsula, a guy who you've really never heard of. He's always been an assistant coach. He's been the offensive line coach for the 49ers. Automatically gets the promotion. That upset a lot of players. San Francisco had the whole offseason jolt where a lot of their players retired or they were released. They released Darnell Dockett, a guy who I think could have contributed to their defense. They got Navarro Bowman back. Outside of that freak ACL, MCL, PCL injury he had back in the NFC Championship against Seattle a few years back, the year they went to the Super Bowl. It's outside of him, they really have nobody on that defense who stands out to me, who can be a legitimate threat. And it just seems like they've got all these role players on the defense, on offense. And it's sad to see you got guys like Anquan Bolden. You had a guy like Vernon Davis. You had a guy like Reggie Bush. You had a guy like Torrey Smith. Figure with those pieces on offense, you'd be able to compete. No, but Reggie Bush has been an injury-prone guy this year. You traded Vernon Davis away. Anquan Bolden, Torrey Smith honestly haven't had that great of production because of the simple fact that, you play coaching into a factor and you play quarterback play into a factor. Colin Kaepernick struggles. You just play the system into a factor. Carlos Hyde goes down with an injury, a guy who looked like probably a really good promising piece for the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers this year. He goes down, and so now the state of the 49ers franchise is in shambles. Blaine Gabbert named the starting quarterback this week. You know what? I honestly do believe Blaine Gabbert might be a good pick. I think Blaine Gabbert, them choosing to bench Colin Kaepernick for Blaine Gabbert was a good move. And I'm going to tell you why. I know it's preseason that at times we got to watch Blaine Gabbert play, but I've watched Blaine Gabbert play in the preseason the last few years, and he's looked very, very poised. I think he's grown a lot over the time from when he was in Jacksonville to now. Obviously in Jacksonville, he got thrown right into the fire. Now in San Francisco, I think he's had time to develop. He's had time to learn, and I truly think that he would be a better presence and a more bigger threat at the quarterback position in the pocket than Colin Kaepernick would. And a lot of times, this offensive system restricted Colin Kaepernick from being able to run, to make plays, to use his feet. A lot of people told him, don't run, sit back in the pocket and throw. But Colin Kaepernick's not a pocket passing quarterback. So that plays a big factor into it. So I'm eager to see how Blaine Gabbert does. I'm hoping Blaine Gabbert has a lot of success. I truly believe that Colin Kaepernick was going to be traded before the trade deadline to maybe the Eagles or somebody. But that obviously didn't happen. They paid him a lot of money, a lot of money that the average guy wouldn't know what to do with. So Colin Kaepernick's on the bench, currently making $100 million. How does that make you feel? I'm sitting at a job, doing all, everything that I can day to day just to barely get by, and a guy gets to sit on a bench and make $100 million. It's unbelievably crazy how much money the NFL dishes out and how much players make. It's a crazy democracy over there. Which leads me essentially to my next point. We look around the league in the NFL and a lot of stuff that's happening. Obviously, you had quarterback benchings, but a coach got fired. Tennessee Titans head coach at the time, Ken Whisenhunt, got fired. The Titans currently sit at a record of 1-6, struggling to get things going. I don't necessarily believe it's all on Ken Whisenhunt. That defense has been playing okay, but offensive pieces, they don't have that many offensive pieces. Bishop Sankey's been a disappointment for the Titans. Marcus Mariota's still injured. Zach Mettenberg is not a backup quarterback. Zach Mettenberg is a terrible quarterback. Hasn't really helped the Titans at all. He's put them in a spot that's hurt them more. If anything, he's getting them closer to a number 1 draft pick. But Marcus Mariota's been hurt ever since the Miami game. He took a shot low in the knee. He's been dealing with an MCL sprain. Could be playing this week, but I don't sit there and I'm not going to blame Ken Whisenhunt. I think Ken Whisenhunt's a great coach. Unfortunately, the business and the nature of the NFL, he was fired, unfortunately. I do believe he will go to a team either this year or next year, and he's going to be a great offensive coordinator for whoever decides to pick him up. So, we're going to look at that and a lot more and to kind of analyze it, and then we got to look at what available coaches are on the market for the Tennessee Titans. But obviously not the ideal start that the Tennessee Titans were looking for. And on the coaches front of, being fired, Chuck Pagano's faced a lot of heat this year. And from what I've read today, rumor has it if the Indianapolis Colts lose to the Denver Broncos this week, more than likely the following Monday, the Indianapolis Colts will fire Chuck Pagano. So a lot riding on that game. Obviously when a team finds out if their coach might be potentially fired if they lose a game, it's kind of incentive for them to come out and perform really well. So we look on both sides of the ball for the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos. But, both teams riding on some pretty high stakes. In the media this week, Andrew Luck wasn't talking too much about the potential records that Peyton Manning could break at, in Indianapolis, and Peyton Manning didn't really want to talk about the potential of breaking records in the first place. That's just how Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck are. They're very class guys. They're all about their organizations and not about themselves, which is something that we need to see more of in the NFL. But Chuck Pagano, great coach, potentially will be fired. So we'll continue to monitor that, but it's not going to be easy for Chuck Pagano as he heads in facing the number 1 defense in the National Football League. The Denver Broncos defense right now has some very impressive numbers. Obviously, right now averaging a league best, holding teams to 16 points a game and around only 261 total yards, 171 total pass yards per game. They rank first in the NFL in that category, and holding teams to 89.3 yards rushing per game, which is the 4th best in the NFL. NFL, but to leading the NFL and holding teams to 16 points per game, being in first place in that category, yards per game and pass yards per game, is very impressive. And it goes to show that the Denver Broncos have the perfect formula. And I truly believe this ever since Wade Phillips came in to bring in the 3-4 defense, which is an aggressive nature style defense that Wade Phillips has played in the past, he's had teams that have been successful with it, especially in Houston. But he didn't have the kind of pieces in Houston that he does now with the Denver Broncos defense. Obviously, you got Von Miller, you've got DeMarcus Ware, Danny Trevathan, Brandon Marshall, you've got Malik Jackson, Sylvester Williams, Derek Wolfe, and a phenomenal secondary with Aqib Talib, TJ Ward, Darian Stewart, and Chris Harris Jr., and Bradley Roby. And you have some solid backups who are going to come in for DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller when they need a break every once a play, 2 plays, a series, every other series for them. And Shaquille Barrett and Shane Ray, who's still dealing with an MCL injury, should be back in a few weeks. But you got guys like that. You got Todd Davis, who can fill into the middle linebacker spot, who's played really well as well this season. Corey Nelson, guy who's been playing really well on special teams. You got David Bruton, who's been playing well, filling in a safety role on certain packages. He's been playing really well this season and on special teams. You see Kayvon Webster every once in a while, but you got those solid role players who can come in for the guys who are starting, the guys who are tearing it up in the league, to spell them every other series when they need a break, but they'll always be in on crucial downs. And I've noticed that with the Denver Broncos. They have a lot of depth on defense. They got the next man up if one guy goes down. We saw when DeMarcus Ware had a back spasm issue against Cleveland, Shaq Barrett came in and played phenomenal. Shaq Barrett is a stud player, probably one of the best players I've seen come out of Colorado State University. He got me very excited to watch Denver Broncos football. And even if you're not a Denver Broncos fan, if you're a fan of football, if you're a fan of the defensive side of the ball, you tune into the Denver Broncos every single week, because watching their defense is unbelievably entertaining. It's explosive. It's aggressive. You got guys flying around. You got interceptions for touchdowns. You got tremendous sacks. You got, a whole bunch of pressure on quarterbacks, and running backs have no room to run. It's very exciting to watch the kind of defensive ball that the Denver Broncos are playing. And right now they're on pace to truly probably be one of the best defenses ever. They're going to be in that category that you see, with the Ravens way back then and the old Chicago Bears back in the day. They're going to be in that same exact category, because the way they're playing right now is phenomenal. They're hard to beat. They're hard to even move the ball on. And it's very exciting to watch. It's exciting football. So tune into Denver Broncos football. So it's going to be a tough task for Chuck Pagano this week when he comes and he plays the number 1 defense, at home. It's not going to make his job easier, and he's probably going to be feeling the heat, as is Andrew Luck. And they're struggling on the offensive line as well. So I expect Denver to attack and be aggressive the entire game, unlike Carolina, who, when they played in Monday Night Football this past week and the Colts lost in overtime to Carolina, the thing that brought the Indianapolis Colts back, and you can go back and you can watch it on film yourself, but the Carolina Panthers went to a prevent defense probably with about 7 minutes left in the game. So the Colts had the ball, and they were able to just hit the quick, short stuff, and guys were able to get out of bounds, and they scored, and they took advantage. They got back in the game, due to prevent defense, which, in my honest opinion, I believe that the prevent defense prevents defenses from winning games. I think it hurts defenses more than it helps them. And I was talking with former Denver Bronco safety Nick Ferguson. He kind of said the same thing. You have to stay aggressive the entire game. In the first half, the Carolina Panthers defense was getting very aggressive with the Indianapolis Colts. They were getting pressure. They were causing a lot of havoc, and coverage was good. Linebackers were blitzing, picking up short passes, things like that, stopping the run, and it worked to Carolina's favor. And then they went away from that, and then they ended up hurting them, and it put them in a risk of losing to the Indianapolis Colts at home on Monday Night Football. So it's only going to get a little tougher for the Indianapolis Colts. And when we look at it and talk about the Colts and their last game against Carolina, we talk about the Broncos and their game against the Packers. It's kind of a flip-flop now that the Packers are going to be on the road taking on the Carolina Panthers, another top-ranked defense who's playing phenomenal. Ever since they've got Luke Kuechly back, they got a stud cornerback in Josh Norman. Aaron Rodgers and the Pack traveled to Carolina to take them on this week. And so I look at this as a really big opportunity for the Green Bay Packers and for Aaron Rodgers to shake off a lot of the criticism that's happened this week. A lot of people saying Aaron Rodgers has always struggled in big games against big teams or good defenses, and I beg to differ. The year that they went to the Super Bowl, they played the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had the number 3 ranked defense at the time, and Aaron Rodgers threw all over them, and the Green Bay Packers defense played really great in that game against Ben Roethlisberger, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. So I don't necessarily buy that argument. I do believe that Aaron Rodgers was limited against the Denver Broncos because really there's nothing you could do when you have such great coverage by a secondary. There's really not much you can do as a quarterback when the coverage is absolutely amazing and your receivers can't get off coverage and you're facing tremendous pressure, on the outside from guys like DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, blitzes up the middle from Sylvester Williams, Malik Jackson and Brandon Marshall, Danny Trevathan, et cetera, et cetera. It's very hard. So it's going to be another tough test for Aaron Rodgers this week as he faces Luke Kuechly, Josh Norman, Roman Harper, guys like that. It's going to be a very tough test for Green Bay, but I do see them responding, and I do see Carolina being knocked off this week, and I see them losing their first game to the Green Bay Packers, which leads me to my next point. We're going to talk about all the undefeated teams in the National Football League right now, and they currently sit at the Denver Broncos, the Carolina Panthers, the New England Patriots, and the Cincinnati Bengals. There are 4 undefeated teams left, so we're going to analyze these teams' next 5 games, and so we're going to talk about it, and we're going to see exactly who's the most vulnerable to lose, and you're going to, I want you to tweet me, and you're going to decide, okay? So the Denver Broncos' next 5 games include being on the road this weekend against Indianapolis, and then they got a home game next week against Kansas City. The week after, they're on the road at Chicago, right around Thanksgiving time, and then you got a home game on Sunday Night Football against the New England Patriots, and then after that, you find yourself on the road against San Diego. I think that New England Patriot game might be the one game that's going to be very, very competitive. I don't know how the Denver Broncos defense will line up against, the New England Patriots offense with Rob Gronkowski, Julian Edelman, Tom Brady, and guys like that. And they've been playing phenomenal on the offensive side of the ball, and Denver's been playing phenomenal on the defensive side of the ball. That's going to be a very good game. I do believe a trap game for the Denver Broncos could be on the road at Chicago. Obviously, a lot of stakes in that game, too. John Fox facing his former team, Denver Broncos facing their former coach. Jay Cutler and the Chicago Bears have some offensive weapons. They're struggling a little bit. We're going to see if Matt Forte can be healthy, if Matt Forte will even be healthy around that time of year. Dealing with a knee injury that he suffered in this last game. Their backup running back didn't really do too well. Matt Forte was involved in a lot of trade rumors, but he didn't get moved at the deadline. So I do see that game being a potentially scary game for the Denver Broncos. For Carolina, they play Green Bay, then they're on the road at Tennessee, and then they play against Washington, then they're on the road against Dallas and New Orleans back-to-back. 2 road games and a divisional road game at that against New Orleans will be a tough test for them. I do see Carolina dropping this game to Green Bay at home. I see them losing 24-17 to Green Bay, to Aaron Rodgers in the pack. And then they have a couple easy games. They've got Tennessee, they've got Washington, then they've got Dallas. And then New Orleans will be a tough place to play at New Orleans. Drew Brees is playing phenomenal right now. Ever since suffering that shoulder injury in the first part of the season, he threw 7 touchdowns last week and a crazy shootout game. But Drew Brees will face a tough defense that Carolina has on the road on 5 games from now. So I see Carolina dropping to Green Bay this weekend and losing their first game. The Patriots, on the other hand, have a really in what was graded as the easiest strength of schedule. They play Washington at home this weekend. Then they're on the road against the New York Giants. They always struggle against the Giants. Eli Manning always plays great against the Patriots. That'll be a trap game. That'll be a game that we're going to look at. It's going to be very interesting to see if the New York Giants will beat the Patriots again. And then they're at home against the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo, at the beginning of the season, everyone thought, okay, after 2 weeks, they're the best defense in the NFL. They're playing really great. And then all of a sudden they fall back down to earth, and they've been very average, very mediocre, and they've struggled, and they really haven't been the same team that we saw in weeks 1 and 2. So that'll be a game I think New England blows over them. And then obviously the Patriots are on the road against the Denver Broncos at the Mile High Stadium. Last time the 2 teams played there in Denver, demolished them in the AFC Championship game, and then Denver went on to lose in the Super Bowl that year. But it's going to be a very interesting strategy and stretch for the New England Patriots in the next 4 or 5 games. Obviously the Denver game is the one that's circled on the calendar. It's probably going to be the toughest. Then their last game out of the 5-game stretch is against Philadelphia at home, and Philadelphia's not playing the greatest ball right now. So I do see the New England Patriots. I see Denver. I think Denver can beat them. So we're going to look at that, and it's going to be very interesting. I'm very excited to see how this all plays out and to see which team gets knocked out first. But, to make things clear, an undefeated season really isn't necessarily the goal. The goal is to get the first seed, to get home field advantage in the playoffs, and to win those playoff games, to get yourself in position to win a AFC Championship, NFC Championship, and then play in the Super Bowl. So as long as you take care of getting, home field advantage, securing a top seed, you'll be okay, and I think that's what really matters the most at this point. And we look at, the Cincinnati Bengals, they play Cleveland and Houston back-to-back at home. They have 2 home games, and the Bengals always play tough at home, so I see them demolishing Cleveland, I see them demolishing Houston. Then they have a tough game on the road against the Arizona Cardinals, who have a really great secondary, a pretty solid defense, and their offense is clicking on all cylinders right now. So that'll be a tough game for the Bengals on the road. Then they're on a divisional game on the road against Cleveland, and they've got a home game against Pittsburgh, and they just went on the road last week against Pittsburgh and won in impressive fashion. So we're going to look at all that and much more over the next couple of weeks as we follow that and all these teams as stretches, down the stretch for the playoff run and positioning and seeding. And it's going to be very interesting. It's going to play out to the very end, I imagine. In the AFC, the NFC is kind of a little bit weaker. It's a less stronger conference, in my opinion. But we'll see how things play out here in the next few weeks. It's going to be a great stretch for us. We're going to have a lot of guests on the show. I'm going to have some friends of mine, some guests around the league, and just in the sports world in general, talk about, teams, latest breaking news. So more guest appearances as we get things rolling here on the Coach's Corner podcast. Also, I will be on air on the podcast, on the B&V podcast with David Boreanaz and Joey Vendetta. It's a very great show. I suggest you go on iTunes and subscribe to that. Go to the iTunes store, type in the B&V podcast, B, the and symbol, V podcast. Search it, subscribe. Great show. They talk a lot of sports, life, funny stuff, and just everything else in between. It's very exciting. I'm very excited. I've been a fan of David Boreanaz ever since I was a young man watching the old Buffy the Vampire Slayer series and Angel. And then obviously I'm a big Bones fan. Been watching Bones for the last 11 years. It's been a very great show. So very excited to be able to talk sports and life with those guys on the B&V podcast. So be sure to stay up to date and in tune with us. Go to CodyRourke18.com. Click on Coach's Corner Podcast, the little section on the right-hand side of the home website. And then there'll be a link where you can go to it on your computer or on your iPhone, whatever series your phone or media that you have. Click it, click the link, and it'll take you to the podcast link page. Click subscribe. And as soon as we're done with the show, it'll automatically be into your phone within the next 15 minutes to 24 hours after a show is hosted and uploaded. So very excited about that. Be sure to continue to stay in the loop at CodyRourke18.com, and all over social media. Go to Facebook and search for the Coach's Corner podcast with Cody Rourke, and click like, and you'll be updated on that. And then obviously on Twitter at CodyRourke18. So thank you for joining me here tonight on the Coach's Corner podcast. Looking forward to having guests next week and periodically throughout this season as we do this show. So thank you very much for tuning in. This is Cody Rourke. The following episode is available for download in the podcast. Go to iTunes Store and type in Coach's Corner Podcast, click on the link, and then click subscribe. This is Cody Rourke, and thank you for listening.